Greetings, family. Rise up, rise up. Sister Shanice in the house, coming to you live and direct. How are you, family? I certainly hope that all is well with you, that you have risen in power and risen in strength. Just checking now that I'm actually live. Yes, it looks like I'm live on air. And just want to welcome you to the Sister Shanice Show family. If you're visiting this channel for the first time, welcome, welcome. We appreciate love you. We appreciate love all of our family members. There are just so many videos on this channel that you can watch. There are over 500 videos here. Okay, so if you're visiting for the first time, just immerse yourself in the richness of the videos that we've got on this channel for you, our wonderful audience. And as you come through the door, please do, say hi. Let me know where in the world you're viewing us from. And feel free to just connect with me via the live chat. If you're watching and you're not live, you won't be able to communicate. So what you need to do is just log in to your YouTube account. Yes, sign in to your YouTube account, and then you'll be able to communicate via the live chat. Okay, so it's always great to hear from you, our wonderful audience. I certainly love the interaction. Let me just turn this fan off for a little while, just in case it's feeding back. And I'm broadcasting live and direct from sunny, hot England. We don't know wagwa, but the weather these days coming like at the Caribbean. I tell you, coming like it's the Afrobean or the Caribbeans, whatever your favorite definition is. But I say it out ya. And I absolutely love it. How are you coping? Are you enjoying the weather? Or are you one of those who's complaining about how hot it is? I'd never complain about the heat. I love it. I could be sweating. I'm still loving it because, while the sun is out, it is just topping up my melanin. It is just, giving me some extra energy. And I absolutely love that. So, as you come through the door, please do let me know that you're in the house. I can see we've got Sister Karen in the house. Rise up, Kev, watching us from the United States of America. It's Sister Kev. It's Sister Kev in the house. Greetings. As always, it's a pleasure to have you in the house, my beautiful sis. And you were the first one in the house too. And you said, that you're going to be in the house and that you're sharing this link with others as well, so they can come and get some knowledge. I thank you so much. Love, really appreciate love your support. And we've got Berkshire in the house. Rise up. We've got is that Namra Tamar Maat in the house. Welcome all the way from Royal Berkshire, UK. Ooh, lovely to have you in the house. And as you come through the door, please do let me know you're here. Hey, it's my beloved Ash rocking up in the house. I told you I'm going to be using that one. She's like, when she turn up, she'll rock up. Someone say, yeah, mom, I love that. Me, I go, rock up, see it with you, sis. Love it. So welcome, family. Brother Kwame Oboje is in the house as well. Great to have you in the house, beloved. He says, Tendai Mwari, black after you, beloved. As always, it's a privilege as well to have you in the house. So we just want to welcome each and every one of the family members that's coming through the door. I'm rearing to go. As the family comes through the door, I think what I'm going to do is to let you know a little bit about what's going on over the next coming days here in the UKKK. Okay, there is always a lot happening, and with the weather being the way it is, it just makes it even more enjoyable to be in this country, I must say. And so we are just basking in sunshine at the moment, and I'm absolutely loving it. And this coming weekend, or strong end as I prefer to say, because there's power in the use of the words, this coming strong end coming to the UK, London town, live and direct on Sunday the 2nd of August, or the 2nd of Messiah, is none other than Taurus Riley.
Things are the blessing. Watch out. Boom, boom, boom. 2nd of August are the big blessing. Taurus Riley, Christopher Ellis, Riley Ellis. Not my last name. Get your tickets this Sunday. It's the daughter's day. It's not even the son's day. It's the mother's day. The father's day. It's the son's day. It's the daughter's day. It's this day, August 2nd. London massive. Oh gosh, man. Niceness in place. Boom.
Big up Bagger John. He does amazing works in our community here, bringing over some of our great entertainers, our great artists who are doing phenomenally well in the reggae fraternity. He also is the one that brings over every year none other than Oliver Samuels as well. Sometimes you'll catch me down there promoting my books, Hidden in the Shadows. So, come on down, support these shows, support our artists, support our talent. And so if you haven't seen Taurus Riley on tour before, you need to catch him in Brixton. Tickets are available at universe.com, eventbrite.co.uk, and at skiddle.co.uk. Taurus Riley in concert at the Electric Avenue in Brixton. So be there, be there. He's also going to be supported by Christopher Ellis as well, another great artist, and Granite Asher. So enough things are one that particular day. But the day before, family, on Saturday, the 1st of Messiah, every 1st of Messiah, aka August, we have our reparations march. And this 1st of Messiah 2026, we have coming to the UK none other than Dr. Umar Ifatunde. He's going to be joining us for our reparations march and rally. So really looking forward to that. It kicks off at 10 a.m. in Pioneer Square in Brixton, aka Windrush Square. So you just come out of Brixton Tube Station, turn left, walk straight ahead for about 2 minutes. Okay, turn left and just keep walking straight for 2 minutes. You're going to cross over major traffic lights, and then you're going to pass the Ritzy Cinema, and then you will be in the square itself. There's going to be a stage, and on the stage are going to be artists, live performances, speakers, drummers. There's going to be stalls. So bring your money to come and patronize the stalls. They're always selling loads of great stuff from the Caribbean, from Africa, and from all around our rich community. You'll be able to find some vibrant goodies on those stalls that you won't find in your ordinary shops anywhere in London town or the UK for that matter. So come on down this coming Saturday, the 1st of Messiah, to Brixton. If you've always wanted to come to Brixton and network with the local community, this coming Saturday is the day to do it. Let me just drop this for you, family. Oh, there we go.
Reparations Day March at the African Pioneer Square, aka Windrush Square, Brixton, SW2 1JQ, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Umar Ifatunde Johnson. Remember, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Desire, devotion, dedication, discipline, and determination will bring forth reparations. Reparations is a must. We're not having it. Sponsored by GalaxyAffiliate.net.
Yes, Quico. All right. You tell me, say the man come. But tell me, how much the man charge? Can I tell you, say the man is expensive and dear?
Yeah, but this time it's very rare. Only thing my charge is in plain fear. Yeah, so few people can come and watch him and stare. Yeah, stand up on a gear. What? Yeah, well, if sit down there and appear, listen, now come for free. Him say, want to talk to him, people them for free. Him not charge with a penny. 1st of Messiah, Brixton, Pioneer Square, aka Windrush Square, Southwest 2, 1JQ. 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Come and be a part of your reparation story. Reparation is a must. Will you say?
Yeah, man, a big things, man.
I shall be not have it
done. We don't have
yeah, man, them man, they good, man. Reason with them brother there. Yeah, man. Live and direct.
There you have
Organized by
it.
African Reparation Day Council, sponsored by Galaxy Freeway.net.
There you have it, family. This coming Saturday, 1st of Messiah. Sound the alarm, sound the alarm, sound the alarm. Make sure that you're there, okay, family? If you would like the opportunity to network with other brothers and sisters from around the country, some people will actually be flying in as well just to join us on that day. As I said, it's an annual event. And we have been marching every year for at least, I think it's 12 years. This may well be year 12, okay? And we get thousands of people turning out. If you want to know what reparations is all about, just go to my latest video that I've uploaded on this channel, okay? Where I interview none other than Nana Prophet Maduti. And he tells us why, we need to be getting involved in the reparations movement and why we should be coming to march and rally on the 1st of Messiah. Okay, so do check out that coming event. Okay, all right, so let me just stop that share now and see who I've got in the house. Drop your comments in the chat. Rise up, brother Kwame Oboje. Are we going to see you in London this coming strong end? Let's see what he says. He says, Akwaba, brother Umar Ifatunde in London. Yeah, man. I certainly hope that you will be joining us and that you will be introducing yourself to me in person, brother Kwame Oboje. And to all of our viewers, do come and take part in the event. Uleo, rise Olu. Ayo, rise up. Shanice, where are you based? UK or Gambia? Hey, family, I am wherever the spirit leads, okay? Wherever my spirit leads, medede. Rise up, Kashiba. Great to have you in the house. Sending us greetings from Maryland in the USA, the United States of America. She says, have my book and I'm ready to learn. Oh, awesome. Yes, I'm going to be coming to you very, very shortly with today's program. Rise up, Sister Teresa. She's in the house saying Hotep and abundance, Sister Shanice and everyone. Great to have you in the house, beloved, as always. Hope we'll be seeing you on the 1st of Messiah, Windrush Square. Oh, brother Kwame, you are going to be missing so much. I know you know because you've been before. It is one of these most memorable days for your diary. And so if you can't make it this year, 2026, put it in your diary for 2027, because as I said, it's an annual event. And every year, family, we take up with foot and we walk from Brixton for go Parliament Square, and we rally in at the square and we march back. And this year we've got brother Ifatunde, brother Dr. Umar Ifatunde walking with us, all the way from Brixton to Parliament. He'll be joining us for the rally and he'll be marching all the way back with us as well. And there'll be another rally at the end of the day at Brixton Square, okay? So try and come in time before the march itself actually sets off and join us. If you're fit enough, join us for the entire journey. If you're not, just take the first few steps with us and take a bus back if you need to, okay? So we are delighted in advance to every single one of you who join us for that absolutely fantastic, blacktastic day. Brother Kwame is saying, Mami Shanice, Kwame has retired from our Pan-African events. NASA, you can't retire none at all, Brother Kwame. Yeah, until the ancestors take us back home, We have a job to do, okay? I know it's tiring. I know we put in such a huge amount of effort and we don't necessarily see the results and the returns. And I know we don't get the credit and the accolade and the support sometimes where it's needed. But nevertheless, you know, we are here on this planet at this time for a purpose and a reason. And we have to make sure before we return to the ancestral realm that we have fulfilled our purpose, that we have completed our mission, and that we have done the work to ensure that we are handing over as a legacy something to the next generation. So if you haven't as yet handed over, the Pan-African legacy that you've been championing to the next generation, you're not ready for retire. If you haven't completed your mission, you're not ready for retire. If you haven't fulfilled your purpose, you're not ready for retire. Okay, beloved? And that's not just for you, that's for everybody out there. And, you know, send enough love to you. And I know you're a hardworking member of our community, and to all of the hardworking members of our community. We see you, and I know sometimes you don't get the credit and recognition that you deserve, but nevertheless, you know, the ancestral realm sees you and knows the works that you are doing, okay? And it's critically important that you continue doing the great works. Okay, let's see. We've got more of you coming in, which is absolutely fantastic. We're just preparing for episode 7. We are on chapter 7 in the book. Okay, family? And I'm ready to kick off. As always, there's so much to go through, never enough time. Let's go back over to the chat. Remember, sign into your YouTube account and then you'll be able to leave messages in the chat. Okay, let us know when you come in, where in the world you're actually viewing us from. And yes, Aluta Continua, back at you. Absolutely. Long after we've gone, you know, our mission will continue until we have not only total freedom, but total liberation, control of our lands, control of our minerals and resources, control of our governments, and control of our populations, control of our agricultural produces, control of all of our medicines, control of our economies, control of our politicians, control of politics in all of our lands until, you know, we have total control again of our land and our resources and everything that we have as a people. Then our mission hasn't been accomplished. Okay. And so, yes, beloved, we overstand. Sometimes, you know, we do so much, we get burnt out, and we do need to take time out. I overstand that. But, you know, just sending love to everybody that's out there and encouragement as well. Never give up. Don't give up. Shan't give up. Life too short. Okay. All right. So let's kick off with our presentation today. As I said, to those of you who are joining me the first time today, we're actually going through the book called To Hell or Barbados, because it's talking about the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. And the author actually set out to do the works in search of his white ancestors. But by the end of the book, you know, he could only find a few stalks. He didn't find a body of white ancestors, descendants of those ancestors who should have been in Barbados. And that's because, I say, they weren't white Irish who were transplanted to Barbados. No, not at all. They were black. And that's why when you go today, you'll find the descendants of those people who were transplanted from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales in Barbados today. So we've been featuring Barbados for the last couple of strongs. We'll probably do Jamaica next strong as well. And family, to those of you who've already given me a thumbs up, thank you so much. To those of you who are yet to give me a thumbs up, please do so. And share and subscribe. Thank you so much in advance. Welcoming each and every one of you. And if you want to support the show, you can do so by joining me on Patreon. That's my link for Patreon if you would like to support the works, okay? And if you're just coming in, just to remind you that this coming Saturday, the 1st of Messiah, is the Reparations Day March, okay? And so we want to see you in the house. We definitely want to see you in the house, okay? There's going to be thousands of us. There usually is, and we need you to come and join us, okay, family? Right, are you ready for today's presentation? Yeah, are you ready for today's presentation? Certainly hope so, because I'm ready to start delivering. I think we've got a few of you in the house. And if you join late, as you know, you can always rewind, yeah? And wheel and come again, okay? All right, so just lining up the presentation for today. And we are going to be continuing our reading. And today we're on episode 7. And the title of today's episode is Paradise Before the Plantations. But actually, before I go into our presentation, sorry, I've just hid the wrong thing. Hang on. No, I do need to go back behind here. Okay, right. Let me, first of all, just rise up, my mentor, Dr. Clyde Winters. So those of you who've been following, you know that Dr. Clyde actually went through a couple of operations a couple of strongs ago. And he's been getting our healing vibrations because he is healing, family. But I still need you to send him more healing vibrations, okay? He's doing well. He's recovering. Not ready, not fit enough to come back as yet. But, you know, our wonderful, very own researcher, historian, author, linguist, fantastic friend of the Sister Shanice show and of myself will hopefully be rejoining us again quite soon. And this great man has written no fewer than at least 50 books. And if you want to support his works, in fact, I would encourage you to support his works. Please do so by going to Amazon and typing in his name, Dr. Clyde Winters. He is the real teacher indeed. And get a book of his as a gift. Give it as a present to a member of our community. I mean, he's got books on a whole range of topics, from linguistic stuff, from ancient Egypt, ancient civilizations around the world. He analyzes a lot of ancient scripts. He looks at archaeological scientific reports, analyzes it for us from our own perspective, and so that we've got our own narrative of our history. He does incredible works, and he was also my teacher and taught me in an Afrocentric research kind of structured way how to go about researching our history and then communicating our narrative to our people, hence what I'm doing today. So I'm forever grateful for his inspiration. And he's inspired me to write as well. And at the moment, I have written 6 books. I should have been on to about book number 8 by now, but I'm telling you, family, the series of courses, or the series of shows that I've been doing on this platform, you know, and all of the research that goes into these shows has actually taken me away from my writing. But at some point, I certainly will be getting back to writing more books. But at the moment, I'm the author of the 6 books that you can see on the screen now. My most recent one is Hidden in the Shadows of Ancient Britain, an erased African history restored. If you are not aware of the fact that we as Africans are the original indigenous people of Britain, and that we migrated to Britain about 40,000 years ago, then you need to get my book, Hidden in the Shadows, because there is so much history that has been hidden from us, family. And it's time that we knew the truth. I've been doing the research. There are many others out there who are doing the research as well, which I'm delighted to be able to say. And so we have thousands and thousands of years of history in Britain that has been covered up, okay? Check out the book, check out my other books as well. And if you'd like a signed copy of the book, I will be at the Reparations March this coming Saturday. So do come to my stall and see me and, introduce yourself to me and also get a signed copy of my book, okay? If you've got an event coming up, you want to have a gift to give away as a prize, why not give away one of my books? If you've got a birthday that you need to buy a gift for, the gift of knowledge is an invaluable gift. So I want to encourage you to give the gift of knowledge to your loved ones. So to those of you who've been following, sorry, I just had some water. So those of you who've been following the series, you will know that last strong we were on episode 6. And I took you on a journey from the wonderful, peaceful life in Ireland to the turbulent years of wars. And what awful, dreadful years the 11-year war was, and the events that happened after the 11 years, the kidnapping, the forced transportations, the enslavement of those people of Ireland is a history that most of us don't know about. And whether we're black or white, we had a number of people in our audience last strong who I think were probably Caucasians. And they couldn't believe the history that they were hearing about Ireland. And I understand that because they weren't taught it, But what happened in Ireland basically was just a blueprint of what followed then in Scotland, in Wales, and other parts of the world. And it's a blueprint that's still being rolled out today. And so basically we, in the last series, we discussed the ultimate cleansing, ethnic cleansing of Ireland. We talked about various acts that had been introduced in Parliament, that's in the English Parliament, such as the Act of Good Affection. And basically that, allowed them to go through the process of transplanting people from Ireland to what they called the tobacco plantations, which was Barbados. They transplanted some to Jamaica and also Virginia as well, and other parts of the so-called West Indies. And these people were transplanted, it said in the Act, to a life of servitude. They didn't call it chattel enslavement at that time, but when you hear the description of the way these people were treated, they were treated no differently from the African slaves who came directly from Africa. So what is absolutely clear, and what I want to make clear on these programs, is that what we're talking about is that in the early days, when the plantations were being populated, not only were they populating the islands with Africans directly from the continent of Africa, but before that, they transplanted the Africans from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales to those plantations. And when I do the research, further research, I'm sure I'm going to find that that blueprint didn't start with England, but that Spain did the same thing. When they expel the Moors, when I do the deeper research and digging, I'm sure I'm going to find that a lot of the citizens and the ordinary people of Spain were transplanted to the Spanish colonies, and that the French, then they followed and they did the same thing of expelling the Moors, that the black population of France was then transplanted to the French colonies. And the same thing happened in other parts of Europe that was emptied of the early African population that was there. And so this is what we're actually uncovering now. So we're finding out that the Kunta Kinte story was just a small fraction of the story of what happened to us, where we were transplanted from, and also, you know, how we got our names, because the bigger part of the story is that the vast majority of Africans that were transplanted to the West Indies and Virginia in the mid 17th century initially came from Britain, and we arrived in those plantations with our name, because we, you know, these were names that we'd had for thousands of years in Britain as free people, as the original indigenous people. Okay, so yeah, we followed the journey, didn't we, of life in Britain for those early Africans. And we can't even begin to imagine, you know, the quality of life that we were living as a people and experiencing as a people in Britain and other parts of the world prior to our conquest, kidnapping, and transplantation to these plantations that the English had acquired, you know. So that's why last Strong, I actually started the story in Ireland, and I presented to you that peaceful, prosperous land that it was prior to it being transformed by war, prior to the conquest and the forced transportations. And, you know, we followed basically the lives of ordinary Irish families. We looked at the homes of some of the most wealthy ones as well that were confiscated under the Cromwellian laws. We looked at the communities that were torn apart, and obviously the loved ones that were being separated from their family members, who were being stripped of their gowns, being stripped of their clothes, being stripped of their houses, their homes, their land, and everything that they knew. And they were being held, first of all, in the jails, and then being put beneath those really awful ships and then set sail for the Caribbean, never to see relatives again, never to see the island that they were born on, that they had lived on, and that their ancestors had built and left to them as an inheritance. We also heard eyewitness accounts, didn't we, of even noble people being stripped of their possessions, stripped of their clothes, torn away from their families. You know, the men were separated from the women, the children separated from their mothers and their fathers, all being forced onto these different ships that were bound for different Caribbean islands. It was a really sad story of loss, but that's the story of last Wednesday. And you can go and watch episode 6 in your own time, okay? It's there under the live video sections on this channel. And today, as I said, it's episode 7, Paradise Before the Plantations. And so if you're joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome. Great to have you on board. Please do subscribe and join the Sister Shanice Show family. I'm here every Wednesday from 8 p.m. UK time with a different live show for you. So today we're going to be looking at life before the plantations. And, you know, I want us to get an idea of what Barbados probably looked like, okay? And what the people love to do, their kind of lifestyle, the quality of life, you know, the houses that they may have built, what they were likely to have been celebrating during those times. And ultimately, I want us to see what was taken away. And it's really, really important that we do that, because quite often, you know, we start the stories, our story, with enslavement. But long before those European ships appeared on the horizon, long before Barbados became known for the sugar plantations, the island was already home to people who had crossed the Caribbean Sea, you know, in remarkable voyages of discovery. And I actually go into detail in one of my series under the last episode about, I think it's called something like the voyage, the African voyage to the New World. But our ancestors were setting sail in boats and canoe type boats to various parts of the world thousands of years ago. Our ancestors, they understood the winds. They knew when to jump on the monsoon winds. They knew which directions those winds would take them. And from Africa, our people went to the Americas. They sailed to Brazil. They sailed to Australia. They sailed to Europe. They set sail, and the seas was the highways. To our ancestors, the seas were our highways. And, we exchanged goods with family members and friends on these other islands. And every island and every nation had its speciality. So if your island had an abundance of brass, then, the people there and the communities there over the generations developed an expertise in making a whole range of produces in brass, which they would then sell to other communities around the globe that maybe didn't have brass. And if your country had an abundance of gold, then, you would be developing and creating lots of golden jewelry and art and goblets and a whole range of produces, for people around the world in gold. And this is how, life was back in the day. And how do we know this? Because the archaeological evidence actually tells us, and we get those insights. So what we do know is that long before Barbados was taken over, conquered and invaded, it was an island that was home to a beautiful, beautiful group of people of African origin and descent. And archaeologically, we know that we first arrived and probably reached into Barbados as early as 1600 BC. So that's well over 3,000 years ago. Almost 4,000 years ago. The early occupiers occupied Barbados. And we've got these clues from the discoveries such as stone tools that have been made from the conch shells. We were making produces from the conch shells thousands of years ago, and our ancestors, their descendants rather, are still doing the same today. We still do remarkable and beautiful jewelry with conch shells, with ancient shells. Not so much the conch shells, but with the other seashells. We put holes in them, make necklaces from them, beads for our ankles, our waist, etc. And, the archaeologists have found some of these ancient shells and found some of these decorated conch shells. And scientifically, they've been able to date them to the second millennium BC. And this is how we find the dates that tell us how long people have been visiting Barbados for. Was it the beginning of the settlement? We don't know. There may well have been people who were on the island thousands of years before that as well. But what we do know is that the island certainly was inhabited prior to the Europeans ever knowing of its existence. And probably prior to the Europeans, today's Europeans, that is, coming into existence at all. So it was between 350 and 650 AD that Barbados truly became home. During this period, you had your skilled seafarers who journeyed north from South American mainland. They navigated hundreds of miles of open seas, and they would do so in these beautifully crafted canoes. Look at this canoe. Our ancestors until today, give them a bit of wood and they're chipping away at it and they're making something beautiful from it. And here's an example of, a bit of that craftsmanship back then that, we could still see evidence of all around the Caribbean and Africa as well up until today. And so back then we established permanent villages. And interestingly, the village huts had the straw roofs as well, very similar to how we do the roofs in Africa. If you look at how, we build those eco-friendly mud brick block houses in Africa, and then we put the straw roofs on top. You know, there's still evidence of that sort of early construction on some of the Caribbean islands as well. And it was on these beautiful islands that we raised our families, that we cultivated the land, that we created our communities, our lifestyle, our culture. And that's how we flourished for centuries. So, you know, the people who were living in Barbados, they weren't like aimless wanderers who just drifted across the Caribbean. No, they were experienced navigators. They knew the direction of travel of the winds. It's something that our earliest ancestors had been studying for thousands of years. So from where the stars are positioned, where they understood the stars, they could understand the wind and the currents, and they knew the sea. They knew when it would take them back home, and they knew when it would take them to where they wanted to go. And obviously the sea provided them with an abundance of fish. It's a tropical warm climate. It was then and it still is now. And for generations, Barbados remained a place of peace, beauty, and belonging. It was home. It was home to thousands of men, women, and children, to generations who were born there. And you know, the traditions developed from and was passed down from one generation to the next. And if you are from Barbados and you're in the house, like our sister Ash, give us a high five in the chat. You know, beautiful, beautiful island. I've visited there several times myself. And, you know, now that it's come back into our ownership, I love it. It is a beautiful, beautiful island. But, you know, before the plantations, it was paradise. For centuries, families just enjoyed life in harmony with the land and the sea. And, you know, these aren't the people that built great stone cities or towering castles. No, because they didn't need to. You know, everything they needed was provided by the island itself. And they just enjoyed the land. They enjoyed the sea, you know. So prior to the enslavement, the conquest and colonization that changed the islands, you know, for hundreds of years prior to all of that, I think it's really important that we start the history where I'm starting it, and that we do take a moment to remember the peaceful, beautiful, tropical paradise island that it was prior to enslavement. And that we do take a moment to remember the fact that there were thousands and thousands of people who were living there, who were enjoying life, you know, who developed a culture and had their traditions and were part of a wider network. And as we look at the crystal clear waters that's teeming with fish, the coral reefs that surround the island that protects the shores, you know, and then inland at the time, there would have been the dense forests as well that would have stretched inwards, and it would have been filled with birds and fruit trees and fresh streams. I mean, this is, you know, an example of one of our paradise islands and what life would have been like prior to enslavement. And yeah, the indigenous people, we as the indigenous people, we could cross the seas. You know, we could go on the open sea for miles, and then we could come back to Barbados, you know, and there is where we flourish for generations. And, you know, the Africans, the indigenous people, some of whom were mixed as well with the later Arawaks and the later Kilananjos, you know, prior to the European colonization, these were thriving communities. Okay. And like I said, we need to start the story here, because too often when it comes to telling our story, it starts with our enslavement. But there was a life before enslavement. There was abundance prior to our enslavement. As the sun rose, each morning on these paradise islands, the fishermen would push their canoes into the sea, just as they do now today in Senegal and in the Gambia. The fishermen, they will go out on the sea and they will, catch the fish and they will bring the fish back. And that fish would feed the local communities, Same, we've been doing that for generations, for centuries. And the sea has an abundance of fish, and we would just take what was needed, not like today when you have the big trawlers that are out there like just grabbing up all the fish that they can, even the small baby ones at the bottom of the ocean. They don't throw back the small ones so that they can grow big. It's not like today where, as a people, we've kind of commercialized everything to the point where, even though there is abundance, we behave in a way that suggests that, there's not going to be any food for tomorrow. No, we just took what we needed, and we knew that the sea had an abundance of fish, and it must have been beautiful. The hunters, they would venture into the forest, and they would catch some wildlife there as well. And then you had the farmers, they would probably be tending to their small plots. They'd be growing like cassava and maize, sweet potatoes, the various tropical fruits and vegetables and crops that we do. And these vegetables and fruits would have sustained our people, and everyone in that village. And the food was good. The food was fresh, even today. When you get the food that's grown naturally in the Caribbean, it's just so wonderful to taste, and it just is so rich for the body. But if food is not grown naturally, then it has no goodness whatsoever, and quite often it doesn't even have any taste. You have to use a whole heap of seasoning to give it any taste. So anyway, this island back in the days, it would have just been the sound of laughter, of children playing, of men chipping away at the wood and the trees, and the air would have been fresh, and the palm trees. Life would have revolved around the family. It would have been idyllic. It would have been beautiful. And of course, pottery was always a big part of life, not just in Africa, but also in the Caribbean as well. And when you think of the creativity of us as a people, imagining being able to make these beautiful, wonderful pots, from clay and from the soil itself. Again, this is a technique that was developed over thousands of years. And, these clay pots would then be put in fires, and then, they would become hard, and we could use them to prepare meals. We would weave baskets, we would spin fiber. Our ancestors were so creative, and they passed their knowledge down from generation to generation. The men crafted the canoes, and they carved tools from shells and stones, and they built their homes. Let me just shut this door here. Sorry about that. Okay, and then of a night time, as we do in Africa sometimes, we gather together around the evening. In the evening, we gather around the fire. Yeah, and we do this all over Africa. When we were in Zimbabwe, there were many evenings where, the locals would prepare a fire, and we'd gather around the fire, and we'd listen to stories, we'd look at the sky. And some of the people who were with were even able to read the stars and tell us what the weather was going to be like the next day. And so there was something beautiful about families gathering around a fire and sharing food, sharing stories. Maybe there might have been some songs that fill the air. And, the elders would pass on the knowledge and the traditions. They talk about the history. And this is how we shared wisdom, before the television. And then sometimes our neighbors would come and they would join us. And it would be a wonderful family gathering. This was life prior to our colonization. This was paradise. Okay, and I think it's important, as I said, that we remember life prior to the plantations. And, you know, village life was a place of cooperation. It wasn't a place of competition. It wasn't a sort of place where everyone, you know, was trying to get one up on each other or outdo the other. It was a place where it was about the community and everybody having a role to play and everyone being concerned about everyone else's well-being in the community. And over the centuries, you know, other indigenous people would have visited, would have settled on the island, and they would have added to the rich cultural integration and tapestry as well. And so for countless generations, Barbados just remained a place of peace, of beauty, and of belonging. But as we know, beyond the horizon, there came a time when the world was changing. European kingdoms were expanding across the Atlantic in search of wealth, in search of gold, in search of land and people to exploit. And as we know, that peaceful rhythm of the island and that beautiful paradise life on the island in the mid-17th century, well, actually before that for Barbados, from as early as the 15th century, initially was with the Spanish, it was about to be shattered. So first of all, you had the Spanish and the Portuguese who introduced slave raiding on the island, and there isn't even accurate figures and statistics about the number of people who were wiped out when the Spanish came as raiders to the island. But what we do know is that violence replaced what was a peaceful place, and that disease would replace what had been a healthy island as well. And an island that had so much love, joy, and laughter, and had done and enjoyed it for centuries, would begin a very long and painful chapter in history. And we don't even know, unfortunately, the number of indigenous people, free people who were living in Barbados before colonization. We don't know the numbers because the historical records, you know, try and claim that the island was uninhabited. And we know that not to be the case because the Arawaks were there, the Asian African descendants were there, the Kilanangos were there, you know, all were there before the Spanish and the Portuguese slave raiding emptied the island. And this was before the English took up settlement of the island as well. And so what we also know as well is that before Barbados became an island of sugar, it was paradise. It was a paradise island of free people. So if anyone tries to say that we didn't have a history prior to enslavement, that when they rocked up on Barbados, you know, we were all cannibals or something like that. Just send them to take a look at this video. Okay, let me just end the slideshow for a moment and go back to you and just check that you're still with me in the house, because we're going to go into the book now. Yes, true talk, Sister Karen. Everywhere they go and everywhere they went, they brought destruction and disease. And Namra saying, I remember it well. And yeah, that peace, the feeling of paradise, you know, that's why a lot of us go in search of paradise and in search of that peace, because we still remember it in our DNA. You know, our inner self remembers the day, remembers the time, like that Michael Jackson song, you know, like Michael Jackson, he remembered those days, he remembered those times because it's in our DNA. Yeah, and Brother Kwame is saying absolutely 100%. Before slavery, Africans traveled without hostility and fear. Absolutely. And he says that slavery has really damaged us mentally as well. That's so true. And Barbados, yes, it's still a beautiful island. Despite, that awful, awful history, it's still a beautiful island indeed. And Namra Tamaat says, my grandmother warned me that the sea don't have a back door. Sister Ash, enjoying the SHKW. I don't know what that's abbreviated for. Enjoying the something. There's a rise up, Sister Barbara in the house, saying a big hi all the way from Barbados. Rise up, sis. Great to have you in the house. Yes, dude, drop your messages in the chat, family. And yes, Brother Kwame, we can never, ever give up the fight as a family, because once we give up the fight, it's all over. It's all over. And thank you so much as well for wishing Bubba Winters all the best. Yes, he's been an inspiration and continues to be an inspiration to us all. Brother Kwame is letting us know that he has one of Bubba Winters' copies of the Mandy in the Asian Americas, and it's an excellent book. Thank you so much for the support, beloved. Much appreciate love. And Sister Karen Kev is saying, beautiful song and video by Michael Jackson. Absolutely. And he will never be forgotten. What a great artist he was. And even though he's gone, he will never ever be forgotten. So thank you for joining us. If you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe, and like and share the video. That would be absolutely awesome. So we're going to go over to the book now, and we're in chapter 7, and the book I'm reading from is called To Hell or Barbados: The Ethnic Cleansing of Ireland by Sean O'Gallaghan. And the reason why I'm reading the book is because he's done a lot of research into the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. And he's looked at the legislation, he's looked at various documents around the period, the policies, letters that were written. He's done a lot of research into the ethnic cleansing of Ireland, but he's gone into it from the assumption that the Irish were white. But those of us who've done the research prior to the Cromwellian era will know that it was Africans that had migrated to Ireland tens of thousands of years ago, who'd populated the country, who were the original people who held positions of all levels of society in Ireland, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales for that matter, and were the ones who had built the cities, built the towns, in the same way that we were building cities and kingdoms in Africa. We were not only building cities and kingdoms in Africa, we were building wherever we went in the world. And the archaeologists have been able to prove and substantiate this, from the skeleton remains that they found. They can do the DNA, and they can tell you that the people who were the oldest and the indigenous people of the land were people of color. Okay, so all of this can be evidenced by them. So chapter 7 is about now the slavery of sugar. We are going into Barbados after it had changed. So Barbados had changed dramatically in the period between the arrival of the Irish indentured servants and the arrival of the first white slaves. It was no longer the tobacco island mentioned by Clonmacnoise clergy. Barbadian tobacco became impossible to sell on the English market due to the superior quality of the Virginian crop. So they originally wanted Barbados as the tobacco island, but the quality of it just wasn't as good. People said it tasted earthy, and the conditions were just not as good really for growing tobacco. And so the bottom actually dropped out of tobacco, and then they tried cotton, and the bottom dropped out of the cotton market in 60-40 when there was a glut of cotton that made it unprofitable. And so then the history of sugar in the Caribbean is directly linked to slavery and the oppression on a scale that Europe had never known. It is a history of great fortunes for those who amassed considerable wealth. So you had the white colonialists from Europe, who were enslaving millions during its boom years in the Caribbean. It began with the introduction of sugarcane, and this was a sugarcane plant by Columbus from the Canary Islands to the Hispaniola. The soil the soil proved suitable for growing sugarcane, and in 1516, the first sugar mill was established there. 2 years later, a contemporary account described fields of sugarcane that were wonderful to see. The cane was as thick as a man's wrist and as tall as the height of 2 men of medium stature. And they're called by the Spaniards trapiche. The first sugar mill was powered by horses that turned a wheel by moving steadily around a machine. If horses or oxen were not available, then the enslaved people were used. Later, Jews in Brazil invented a water-powered mill, which the Spaniards called the ingenio, which produced twice as much sugar as the trapiche method. This method of producing sugar had one drawback. It was confined to areas with plenty of water. The cultivation of sugar cane spread to the English and French colonies in the Caribbean. Sugar is a labor-intensive industry, and the Dutch, who had captured a part of Brazil from the Portuguese, were able to supply that labor. They had plenty of capital. Amsterdam was as important as London was in raising capital in the mid-17th century. But the merchants there tended to prefer the certain profit of trade to the uncertain one from colonization. Accordingly, 30 years later, when the Portuguese reoccupied Brazil and expelled the Dutch Jews, many of them moved to Barbados, where they invested their capital in the sugar industry and the enslavement trade. In 1690, Dalby Thomas, a historian, described the Dutch as mostly Jews and external promoters in search of a moderate gain by trade. They saw the potential of Barbados as a market for slaves and sugar-making machinery. Financing the sugar planters on the island would create a derivative demand for slaves. The Dutch had no real interest in indentured servants as a dominant system of labor organization on the island, although they had engaged in the indentured service trade from Ireland in the 1930s. As we have seen in Captain West's narrative in chapter 5, the leading position of the Dutch in the slave trade meant that they saw indentured servitude as inimical to the New World economic and social interests. And even today, family, this is what we hear about the interests of the investors, at the expense of the interests of the ordinary people. They don't care if they use us as enslaved people to make their money, as it was back then, to grow their sugar and to keep the mills going. They don't care about the quality of life, the torturing, the really awful conditions. They don't care as long as they're making money. Just like in parts of Africa today, we have children down the mines digging out the coltans. We have children in the gold mines and these other mines doing really awful jobs and laboring with their hands all day, every day, from young children. And these investors just don't care. They didn't care back in the early 16th century about the conditions on the slave plantations, and they don't care today either about the conditions in some of the mines in parts of Africa, you know, like the Congo and other places where children are digging up the minerals with their bare hands. As far as they're concerned, you know, we are there, you know, as slave labor. And it's the same today as it was back then. The only difference is that we're not seeing the whips and we're not seeing the chains, you know, but it still very much is a system of enslavement. Right, where was I? So, yeah, Captain West's narrative. Besides being Jewish, the Dutch merchants who ended up in Barbados were not allowed by law to employ English servants themselves. Neither were they allowed to buy the indentured of early settlers, nor later of Irish or other white slaves. They were allowed only African slaves. Sugarcane had been introduced to Barbados by a Dutchman in 1637, but was grown at first simply as fodder for capital and crushed to make a sweet drink for local use. The planters had no knowledge of how to turn the sugarcane into sugar. Richard Ligon in 1657 gave an account of the beginnings of the sugar revolution on the island as cultivation started in 1642. His is an almost contemporary account of its introduction. Now, Richard Ligon, I've quoted him before in this book, and I actually found a copy of his book as well that he wrote back in 1657. And, you know, I was comparing some of the text from that book to what was being written in here, and pointed out that it's really important quite often that even when we're reading modern books, we go back to the sources that they quote to see whether or not they're actually providing for us an accurate translation of the early texts or those early sources. Anyway, Richard Ligon's work is particularly useful and interesting for us because he was an eyewitness. He wrote about what he saw was actually happening on the plantations. And he said, at the time we landed on the island, which was in the beginning of September 1647, we were informed partly by those planters we found there and partly by our own observations that the great work of sugar making was but newly practiced by the inhabitants there. Some of the most industrious men, having gotten plants from Penman Brook, a place in Brazil, and made trial of them at the Barbados, and finding them to grow, they planted more and more, and as they grew and they multiplied on the place till they had such a considerable number as they were worth the while to set up a very small ingenio, and so make trial that sugar could be made upon the soil. But the secrets of the work being not well understood, the sugars they made were very inconsiderable and of little worth. But about the time I left the island, he said, which was in 1650, they were much better at making the sugar. He didn't think that sugar would take off in Barbados, but as we know, it actually did. The sugar industry became not only the staple one for Barbados, but the island itself became known as the Sugar Island. So Ligon, he was correct in his foreseeing the expansion of the large plantations at the cost of smaller ones. He said, I believe when the small plantations of poor men's land, 10, 20 or 30 acres, which are not too small to lay to sugar plantations, when they're brought up by the greater men and put into plantations of 500, 600 or 700 acres, that 2/3 of the island will be fit for plantations of sugar. So we're hearing here that, you know, sugar plantation system had to be structured around large plantations. It wasn't going to work for small plantations. And that once that started happening and the larger planters started buying up the land from the small plantation owners, then there was that transition to a sugar growing economy in Barbados. And the small tobacco planters, they were wiped out, and the large sugar plantations of between 100 and 500 acres took over. So let me jump forward a little bit in this chapter. So as it still continues to talk about the early days of sugar planting. So I'm jumping over to page 93, where it says, however, the planters in the early days of the sugar revolution found them intractable and difficult to train, particularly for work in the mills. They cried out for white labor, it is claimed. So they're claiming here that, it was really difficult to train the African slaves or enslaved Africans who were there. And these were the ones that had been transported to Brazil, who had now been imported to Barbados. They were saying it's really difficult to train them. Maybe they just didn't want to do the work. So apparently they were crying out for white labor. There's no source quoted for this. So it couldn't well be the author's opinion of how the story went. So what we have to know is that when we're reading some of these books, and we are actually reading quite often the views, thoughts and ideas and opinions of the author. And unless they're quoting a source and it's in quotes, then they're not getting it from a source. Right, Cromwell, through his victories in England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, solved their problem by shipping prisoners of war to Barbados. This not only solved the problem of what to do with a potentially seditious population, but also earned money for the Commonwealth. These prisoners were not sent as indentured servants, but were sold in perpetuity to the sugar planters of Barbados. And he's pointing that out here because, there's mention about Irish slaves not being slaves, but being indentured servants. And indentured servants were the ones who would be sold to a planter for maybe 7 years or 10 years. After that, they would get some land and they would be able to even own slaves themselves and become, a plantation owner. And so that was the idea of indentured servants. However, we learned in previous chapters that wasn't what happened when they actually arrived in Barbados. And I've also seen ship logs as well of people who were shipped, not to Barbados, but in this instance, was it Barbados? I'll bring it up next. Yeah, let me find it in the presentation, because the ship log actually talks about where the people had come from and were going to. And it was a ship log of people who were sent from Scotland, who were being transplanted from Scotland. And I just can't remember if they were going to Barbados or Jamaica. So, but let me just quickly find it here, because that ship log is so important, because it actually tells us that, here we are. So this is a list of 150 Jacobite prisoners, and their details were recorded at Lincoln, York, and Lancaster. And they had basically been captured at sea in 1747. That's like 100 years later, when they started emptying Scotland, because first they did Ireland and then they did Scotland, didn't they? And in this particular list, these individuals were apparently indentured servants in the West Indies, or on their way to the West Indies. It doesn't say where in the West Indies. And their ship was intercepted, and they were basically stolen. And so the captain of the ship, who owned the ship and who supposedly owned these people, provided a list of their names, their occupation, and also a description of the individuals. And the vast majority of them were described as black, brown, or swarty. If only we could get hold of more of these ship records that actually recorded the description of the Irish, I know that we will find that similarly, they would have been described as black, brown, ruddy, chestnut, maybe, swarty, meaning, a dark color. So there is a lot of evidence around, but can we find it? Can we find it? Or is it going to be hidden from us? Of course it's hidden, and it's extremely difficult to find. But it's out there, and with every day as we do the research, we uncover more and more. And, my attention was drawn to that ship log a little while back when I was watching a particular YouTube video. They actually discovered it in a book. And I found the book as well, because I always check the sources. I went to the book, and sure enough, in that book, there was a copy of the record of that ship log that was describing the complexion of the people who were being transplanted from Scotland in the 18th century to the West Indian Islands. So, so Cromwell, through his victories in England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, solved their problem by shipping the prisoners of war to Barbados. This not only solved the problem of what to do with a potentially seditious population, but also earned the money for the Commonwealth. Okay, I read that bit, didn't I? These prisoners were not sent as indentured servants, but were sold in perpetuity to the sugar planters of Barbados. They became the first white slaves in relatively modern times, slaves in the true sense of the word, owned body and soul by their masters. So he's saying that, this group were a group of white slaves, and there were some whites among the black slaves, because even on that log, there were a few white, and, there was about a list of 100 names, and I don't think there were more than about 5 whites that were on that list. And I do have the whole list that has been analysed and interpreted, and I'll bring that as a separate presentation. I'm just, referencing it for today to say that there were some whites indeed, and those early white slaves were few in numbers, and they were owned body and soul in the same way that the blacks people who were being transplanted were. Colonel A.B. Ellis, who did considerable research on the subject of white slaves, published his findings in a magazine named Argosy in 1883 in an article entitled White Slaves and Bond Servants in the Plantations. He wrote, "Few but readers of old colonial papers and records are aware that a lively trade was carried on between England and the plantations, as the colonies were then called, from 1647 to 1690, in political prisoners, where they were sold to the colonialists for various terms of years, sometimes for life." That's what he said. Now, he didn't say in that little bit there whether these people who were being sold and what he'd read, he didn't describe, give us a description of the people who were being sold as it was being reported in those colonial papers. Now, what that means is that either the papers didn't say, or he just didn't mention it. And so as an author, you can make an assumption whether those people that he was talking about was either black or white. But where's your evidence? You've got to come with your evidence. So he's done considerable research, and he's been quoted here. But as I said, in the bit that he's quoted, let's go on and see what else he says. Oh, hold on. So in an article entitled White Slaves and Bond Servants, so he's entitled it White Slaves and Bond Servants in the Plantations. And he was basically saying that very few readers would have known about this slave trade of white slaves in the Cromwellian era. And so, as I said, what we're saying is that we're not saying that there weren't any white slaves. There certainly were. How many in proportion to black slaves? I would say there were very few indeed, because at that time, I'm convinced that the vast majority of people in Ireland were still black, blackety black, as they were in ancient times and earlier times, before the ethnic cleansing and then the movement of the English soldiers into Ireland to take the land, the homes, the heritage, and the wealth that those people had left behind. Old records in the Barbados Museum and Historical Society files show that, according to planters' estimates, Barbados alone received thousands of prisoners of war, yes they did, who were regarded as white slaves. Interesting. Now, I've actually seen some definitions of white as well, and it's not as we interpret it to be today. So we do need to do a bit more research into that, because this author goes on to say that there was a survey carried out in 1650, even before the advent of the Irish white slaves there, showed that the island had a population of 20,000 white men. The first evidence we have of white men being sold in from Wales, where 240 Welsh bachelors were sold. Let me read that again, make sure I got it right. So a survey carried out in 1650, even before the advent of the Irish white slaves there, showed that the island had a population of 20,000 white men. The first evidence we have of white men being sold is from Wales, where 240 Welsh bachelors were sold in May 1648 for £1 each and shipped to Barbados. Make of that what you want, family. 10,000 prisoners were taken at the Battle of Worcester. So we've jumped from a case where 240 Welsh people were sold, and it's claimed that they were white men. It's not in quotes, so we don't know. All right. And then it's jumped now to scale this up to 10,000 prisoners. But who were these prisoners that were being taken at the Battle of Worcester? Yeah, it said that they were mainly Scots with some German mercenaries. But then how did Franklin, do you remember the quote from, what's his name? Jefferson Franklin. Oh gosh, let me find his quote for you, family, because it's really important that we get an eyewitness account of that it was Benjamin Franklin. Okay, there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin, who was an eyewitness to what the color and racial profile was of Europe in the 18th century, mid 18th century. And he was complaining, just as Trump is complaining today, where's my tissue, just as Trump is complaining today about, too many blacks, basically. And he was saying, look, this is an opportunity to make America white. So this whole idea of making America white isn't new. This Benjamin Franklin was saying the same thing back in 1751. And he is quoted as saying, why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements and by herding together, establish their language and manners. Okay, so it's complaining about the Palatine Boers to the exclusion of ours. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglicizing them, and will never adopt our language or custom any more than they can acquire our complexion? So with that, he was saying that, you know, the Germans had a different complexion. He was calling them aliens. And, you know, these people were saying, he was saying, we're coming into the colony, and, you know, shortly they will be so outnumbered that they will Germanize them instead of Anglicifying them. And that these Germans at that time would never be able to acquire their color. So let's see what else he had to say. He said, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. Now, isn't that the case today, family? The people in the world, the white people in the world, the Caucasians of the world today are proportionately very small. He said back then that all Africa is black or tawny, Asia, and tawny is brown, Asia chiefly tawny, America exclusive of the newcomers wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also, the Saxons only excepted. So the only exception, they're saying, to being black and tawny were the Saxons, who with the English made up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. Can you believe that? At the time of his observation, which was in 1751, when he was expressing how upset he was about other Europeans, especially Germans and others, coming as immigrants to America, you know, he was saying, look, guys, this is an opportunity for us to make America white. Don't let all of these, you know, black Germans come in, because right now, the whole of Europe is black. The Spaniards, the Italians, the French, the Russians, the Swedes, are generally all black, he was saying. And all of this as well is borne out by genetics as well. There was a big major study that was done of the ancient Swedes, and they were shocked to discover, the Swedes were shocked to discover that the ancient Swedes were indeed black. We've seen some of the images from the Russian archives. So, you know, we know that the ancient Russians and those in positions such as priests and saints, etc., were all black, you know. The French, the Italians, the Spaniards. And look at where we are now in Europe. So this is serious things, you know, and at the same time, I'm saying to you here as well, from the archaeological, genetic and DNA evidence and everything else that there is to prove it, you know, the English, Irish and Scottish and Welsh were black as well in the early days. What happened to them? I believe that this book is explaining what happened to those early blacks of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And in this story of where they're focusing on the small group of whites, there's a bigger story, and it's about what was happening primarily to the blacks. Now, this goes on to say that tens of thousands of prisoners were taken at the Battle of Worcester, mainly Scots, with some German mercenaries, and they were marched to London. And of those who survived, about 1,500 were shipped to Barbados to be sold, presumably by auction, to the planters there. And so the reason why I read you Benjamin Franklin's quote is because when I talk about Europeans in time gone by. When I talk about, you know, the early Germans, the early Swedes, the early Spaniards, the early Italians, the reason why his quote is important, because he was an eyewitness. He was a man who was well traveled, and he was observing, you know, the racial profile of basically humanity at that time on a country by country basis. Okay, so that's why his quote is so important, and we need to have that information in the back of our mind when we read, you know, the ancient works of those writers and historians from, you know, that time gone by. Right. Moving forward, a German soldier of fortune, Henrik von Uechtritz, gave an account of conditions there. He mucked out pig houses, swept out slave quarters, which he described as the most demeaning job for any white man, and worked in the cane fields under a sweltering sun for 12 hours a day, with an hour's break for a lunch, a boiled maize. Von Uechtritz was lucky. After 18 months of sweated labor, he was ransomed by some German merchants for 800 pounds of sugar and returned to Germany, where he wrote an account of his sufferings. So that'd be really interesting, because, you know, when he writes his account of his suffering, he will write about the account of other whites who suffered, and obviously about the vast majority of Black people who were there as well. So that's a book worth getting hold of and having a read of, because it is a first-hand account and an insight into what life was like on the plantations in Barbados while he was there. So let me make a note to try and get hold of a copy of his works. Perhaps the most telling of all the evidence that these men were regarded as slaves comes in a statement of men taken during the Penraddock Rising in 1655. The writers were Marcellus Rivers and Oxenbridge Foyle. Now, I've tried to find their works and I haven't been able to find it yet. Their 1655 works on behalf of themselves and 70 more freeborn Englishmen. It was printed in the 11th year of England's liberty, 1659, and begins, "The humble petition of Marcellus Rivers and Oxenbridge Foyle gentlemen, and of the 70 people of this nation now in slavery, humbly sheweth that your distressed petitioners and others became prisoners at Exeter and Ilchester in the West, upon pretence of the Salisbury Rising in the end of the year 1654, although many of them never saw Salisbury or bore arms in their lives." So this is being quoted as evidence of a group of white people who were petitioning, you know, to the gentlemen in Parliament to try and get relieved from, you know, their enslavement and their capture. And they were trying to say they never saw any arms, they didn't have anything to do with anything there. But having been in prison for over a year without trial, the statement continues, "They were hurried to Plymouth aboard the ship John of London, Captain John Cole, master, where after they had lain on shipboard 14 days, the captain hoisted sail, and at the end of the 5 weeks and 4 days anchored at the Isle of Barbados." My gosh, the writer says it was an amazingly swift crossing for the period when most ships took between 8 and 10 weeks. Imagine being at the bottom of a ship, lying down on a board for 8 to 10 weeks. And they were transported, it says, in appalling conditions, kept locked under decks, almost decks amongst horses. On their arrival in May 1656, the master of the ship sold your miserable petitioners to most inhumane and barbarous persons for £1,550 weight of sugar apiece as the goods and chattels of Martin Noel and Major Thomas Alderini of London. So, it's been claimed here that this group of people who are petitioning Parliament were basically treated in the same way that enslaved Africans, that it's reported that enslaved Africans were being treated, being kept locked up under the decks, having to lie there on the board for the crossing, for the entire period, or in amongst horses and all sorts of other cattle that were there, and then being sold on the auction blocks on their arrival. But then, of course, we will get Europeans who will say, whites were never enslaved, they were never slaved, da, 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 da. So either they were or they wasn't, So, we need to try and make sense of all of this here on both sides. The petitioners goes on that those sold were the age of 67 years, divines, officers, and gentlemen. They were marched to the plantations where they endured the most unsupportable captivity, grinding at the mills, ending the furnaces, or digging in the scorching island, having nothing to feed on, notwithstanding their hard labor, but potato roots, nor anything to drink but water. The petition continues to describe their treatment by their Christian masters as being brought and sold from one planter to another, or attached as horses and beasts for the debts of their masters, being whipped at the whipping post as rogues for their master's pleasure, and sleep in sties worse than hogs in England, and many other ways. They're miserable beyond expression or Christian imagination. So this letter was sent to the High Court, and there was another letter that accompanied it that was sent to the High Court, and it read, "My noble lord, I beg your lordship pardon for the rude approach by my slave, one of those many mentioned in the slave petition to Parliament, thrown together out of this sometime free and noble nation of England, and obscenely buried alive in the desolate vault, the Protestant purgatory, Barbados." Their petition actually led to a heated debate in Parliament on the 25th of March, 1659. One member of Parliament, Sir Arthur Hazelrig, said that if we have fought our sons into slavery, we are of all men most miserable. Another member is said to have said, Mr. Coscoen pointed out that if such conditions were allowed to prevail, our lives will be cheap as those of Negroes. I would have you consider the trade of buying and selling men. Martin Noel, planter and slaver, to whom Rivers and the others had been sold, had been elected MP for Staffordshire in 1656. So the same planter that they were complaining about was an elected MP. He was an elected MP for Staffordshire in 1656. He now intervened in the debate. Hold on, he said, to assure the House that conditions on the plantations were not as bad as the petitioners alleged, that the servants, as men in England, as servants, as he called them servants, not slaves, they were better off than the common husbandmen in England. And he said that, that in Barbados, it was a place of grateful to know for trade as any part of the world, a place as grateful to you for trade as any part of the world, not as odious as it is being represented. And this is what was happening, wasn't it? Back in the day, you occasionally had, some groups of enslaved people who managed to get a message into Parliament, manage to get a petition before Parliament, and then you would have MPs who've got a vested interest in the plantations, who are MPs, and therefore, are watering it down to say, oh, no, it's not, the conditions are not as what the petitioners are claiming it to be. These people, they're better off than the Englishmen who are unemployed here in England, and trade in Barbados is as good as anywhere else in the world. The Speaker of the House, Sir William Lenthal, responding to the evidence, said, I hope it is not the effect of war to make merchandise of our own men. There are no records extant to show if Rivers, Foyle, and the other gentlemen were ever repatriated, but at least they were able to draw the attention of the English public to the question of white slavery in Barbados. In view of the above, it is surprising that some historians and authors deny that white slavery ever existed in Barbados. For instance, Michael Craton, in his Sinews of Empire, 1974, states that there is absolutely no evidence that whites were ever true slaves in the English colonies. He goes on to quote Eric Williams, who in his Capitalism and Slavery, 1942, states that whites were never white slaves in the same sense that blacks were. However, Gratton does admit that the unfortunate Irish captives and perhaps some Barbados criminals were servants for life without indentures. Just what the Irish captives endured as servants without indentures is described in the following chapters. And that's where we would go on to chapter 8. And basically, chapter 8 is describing in more detail what life was like on the plantations. And we know what life was like. It says, as the cultivation of sugar increased, so did the number of black slaves in Barbados. There were only a couple of hundred in 1640, but by 1646, he said there were 6,000 blacks slaves and about 40,000 whites, including indentured servants. So we're going to look at some statistics now, because this next chapter talks a bit about, the hell, really, of life on the plantations. And then as we go through that chapter on the plantations and what life was like about growing the cane and the sugar mills and how lucrative it was as a business enterprise, and where it goes on to, talk about life in Barbados after that, we are on to chapter 9, which I might jump to for next strong, because it's another very interesting chapter. But let's have a quick look in the chat to see if you're all still with me. And then we're going to look very briefly at some statistics. So we've got some comments, and Al-Kabalan is in the house. Al-Kabalan says, well, Owali Nevis. Owali is the indigenous name for the island. Oh, Owali, rise up. Thank you for that, Al-Kabalan. And we've got Brother Kwame Aboje, bigging up Brother Al-Kabalan, who's in the house. Welcome, welcome. And he's also saying that, there is a cover-up, don't you think? Absolutely. The contradictions, were they white slaves or were they not white slaves? And, and if there were they being treated the same as the so-called black enslaved Africans, or were they being treated differently? You see, these are some of the questions. They can't claim that the Irish who were shipped to Barbados were white without claiming that the Irish were slaves. And they can't claim that the Irish that was shipped to Barbados were black, because they don't want us to know about the black Irish. So they're probably having discussions now in their universities at Oxford and Cambridge and the like about how they should spin this story for the next generation, because too much of the truth is coming out. Rise up, Sister Karen. Sister Kev says, but the indigenous people were here in this country already, can never be all white. They are delusional. Exactly. You know, or would they claim that they wiped them out and that the country was uninhabited, which is what they tried to claim. But we know that the country was inhabited because there is archaeological proof that the country was inhabited and had been for thousands of years. Kwame Oboje says that Benjamin Franklin was a demon who wanted to make America all white. That's MAGA racist unto Trump. Yes, indeed. It's what Trump is still championing today. And, you know, Mama Adawa is in the house as well. Yes, indeed. Some of them did get a taste of it. Not in the numbers or the percentage or, you know, to the extent that we as Africans did, but some of them, I believe, definitely does. And Betty's Sister Adawa says, you know, they have always been 1% of the world's population. Yes, but because they work together as the, you know, demonic force that they have been throughout history, they've been able to conquer so many parts of the land of this world. That's right, Sister Shani. Africans in Ireland were still the same, especially with our melanin genes. That's right. And even today, the archaeological and genetic evidence is proving that to be the case. So I came across an article, read an article where a Caucasian woman made a previous sugar mill into a home. You know, these sugar mills, they ought to be places of historical preservation, you know, where, it's like it should be like a sanctuary, a sacred ground where we remember what our ancestors went through. But these people want to make it into a house and a home where they celebrate and have parties. Wow, wow, wow. So I'll come back to messages in just a little while. I've only got a few minutes left, and I just want to look at, you know, some of these statistics. So let's go back to the presentation. Oh, all right, let's go around here and get the presentation up on the screen. Let's have a quick sip of water. So we've gone from, you know, our beautiful, beautiful Barbados island and the wonderful lifestyle that the people were living and enjoying prior to the colonialists coming on the land. And let's have a look at, you know, some numbers. And so this is what happened with the European ships as they came in. You know, and not only did they bring those really awful new visitors to the land who we welcome with open arms because we just didn't understand, you know, the nature of these people. But anyway, with their coming, it marked a new beginning and a new age, of conquest and colonialism. And as their riches grew from the production of sugar at the expense of the enslavement of our people, within a very short place of time, life on the island was just transformed into living hell for us as Africans, whether we were directly from the continent or from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And it transformed into living hell for us. But for them, it was the wealthiest sugar-producing colony in the English Empire at the time. But, you know, we're not going to forget the horror story that lied behind the accumulation of that wealth. And they owe us. They owe our ancestors, and they owe us as the descendants of those ancestors. And that's why our fight for reparations is so, so important, because the way they accumulated that wealth and the wealth that they accumulated built the Western world as we see it today. And even today, you know, the Western world continues to be sustained on the wealth of our Caribbean and African islands. And they have become the wealthiest part of the world in terms of commercial, in terms of capitalism and commercialism. And we don't desire really the sort of lifestyle that this new age and this new world and these people who are in charge have created for us. We had a beautiful world before, a beautiful, beautiful world. And our world was more at one with nature, you know, but they came and they made life hell for us for almost 400 years. You know, the beautiful sound of our children playing and those nights around the open fire would be replaced with children crying, with the whips, you know, the sound of the crack of the whips. And our once beautiful community, all you would probably have heard, you know, after they came was the cries and the woes. Oh my gosh, from sunrise till nightfall. So we are owed for those 3,000 to 4,000 years of absolute hell. We really are. We're not saying that one or two white people wasn't among us, but certainly not in the numbers or to the extent that the Black people were left to suffer on those plantations. Their numbers are almost insignificant. They experienced a bit of the tragedy, one or two of them, but slavery was really all about enslaving us as African people. And another thing that I actually came across in the reading as well that they did to us, and they did to the people of Ireland who were also of African descent, they demonized us. They said that the Irish were subhuman. Who are the ones that they were always describing as subhuman? Was it not us as Africans? These were the African Irish who were getting that treatment. So just a quick look at the numbers. Hang on, where is it? Not those numbers. Here it is. These are the official figures of the early population of Barbados. They claim that between 1627 and 1650, there are about 13,000 people there. Now, just to say that we've got these official statistics, and they're the ones that I've just shown here. And this is come from some old censuses about the population and the estimates of the population in Barbados, during those periods. But when I went through the book to Hello Barbados, the ethnic cleansing of Ireland, and when I calculated there from the shipping records, from the letters that had been written, from the government papers and the plantation records, when you start adding all of those figures up, just from that book alone, you really begin to question these numbers because it just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. The figures that is being presented of the population of Barbados, when you examine, you know, all these other documents from eyewitness accounts, from records of the time, these figures grossly underestimate the size of the population in Barbados. But maybe they just didn't include the Africans in these figures, or they included some Africans, because there's some Black here, but not all. I'm not sure what they were doing at that time, but we can see the figures that they've got here. But then when we go through the book, at one time it talks about approximately 50,000 people being transported to Barbados between 1650 and 1660. It also talks about 40,000 Irish soldiers that were sent into armies, leaving their families behind. And later on, we learned that those family members were transported overseas. Now, if you had 40,000 soldiers who had on average, say, 4 family members that they left behind, and probably a lot more because these were like, you know, extended families. But anyway, just say even if there was just 4 family members that each of them left behind, that's about 160,000 family members who were later transported to the West Indies. Where are they in the figures? And then the book we were reading, there were so many children who were kidnapped in large numbers, so many orphaned children who were sent aboard as well. Then there were occasions where they were rounding up the women and the children and forcibly removing them as well. And there's so many accounts of large numbers of people who were being corralled, you know, rounded up, corralled and penned, and then put onto the ships. And these ships would hold 250 to 350 prisoners at a time, you know, and that these people were being transported to Barbados and the other colonies. So where are all these people in the figures? Where are they in the official census? So the maths just don't add up. So this needs to be looked into in a lot more detail. And there was that survey, the Down survey, and they actually carried out a very thorough analysis of the Irish population. And that was around, just they carried out the survey just after the 11-year war. And before the 11-year war, the population was about 1.1 million. But after the war, about a third of the population were found or calculated to have perished in the war. That was, they calculated that 568,000 people had perished during that conflict, leaving behind, you know, just 2/3 of the population. And so what happened to the population that was left behind? Because what we do know is that they cleared the land of the Irish. They cleared the land of the Irish. So what happened to those people that were transported? Hold on a minute. Sorry, just a quick correction here. The survey counted that the population had been reduced to 1.1 million. So originally the population was over 1.6 million, but 568,000 had perished, leaving behind 1.1 million Irish. And these Irish were transplanted to the Caribbean and Ireland. 1.1 million. Where are they in the figures? At least hundreds of thousands would have ended up in Barbados. Where are they in the figures? So are they hiding the numbers as well as the history? Because I suppose the statistics would need to make sense. I mean, what happened to over 1 million Irish who were transplanted? So there's more research to be done, clearly, family, as we ask ourselves what happened to those people. Did they just disappear? Did they all die off? You know, were they moved on from Barbados? Did they put them all in the military as they were doing in Ireland? What happened to 1.1 million people from Ireland who were later transplanted? So there's a lot more work and research that needs to be done, family, into exactly what happened to the population of Ireland. Wow, wow, wow. So, you know, this is where I conclude episode 7, family, for today. I certainly hope that you got a lot from today's presentation. There is always so much of our history that we don't know, that we are getting to know. and that we are uncovering family on a daily basis. So if you have any comments and you want to put your comments in the chat, then yeah, please do. I'd like to hear your thoughts just before we wrap up our show today. So one of the tragedies of studying our history is, of course, we've got this wonderful, wonderful pre-enslavement life. And then we've got the awful 300 to 400 years of plantations, auction, whips, and suffering, you know. But we have to remember the life that we had before as well. We can't only just focus on the enslavement, which we know is extremely important, and these people have still got to pay for. So let's just have one or two comments before we go. Yes, Al-Kabelan, true talk. Al-Kabelan says, let's not forget that the last payments made to the former plantation owners as compensation was made in 2015, in our lifetime. It was our taxes, family, that was still paying these enslavers, you know, for the loan that the government had taken to pay those enslavers back then. And the country didn't finish paying back the loan until 2015. Let that sink in. 2015. Then they want to tell us, forget about reparations. Their descendants we didn't repay the loan until 2015. And as I gave us an example, you know, some of these people were like MPs in Parliament. Yeah. And so they wanted the whole industry of sugar plantation, and they didn't care at what cost to continue, because it was making a lot of money for them. So final couple of comments. Africans, we were labeled as subhuman, but Europeans are more immoral than absolutely. They are the epitome of immorality, of inhumanity, of being soulless. For real, for real, for real. But Sister Barbara, with us Africans, we kept ourselves not just in Barbados, but wherever we were as Africans in the world. That's right. That's why we'll see the similar culture. We saw that beautiful culture there of the pottery and the art making. We see that all over Africa. We see the way that the original houses were made with the straw roofs. You see that till today all over Africa. And of course, the melanated indigenous people themselves, you know, descendants of the original Africans. So it doesn't matter where we are in the world, you know, we've got this rich, beautiful melanated skin. What we know is that we are the original people of humanity, and our origin is African. Our nationality might be American or British or Canadian or Australian or Jamaican. That's our nationality. But our origin, our ethnicity is African. And as Africans, about 200,000 years ago, we started our migration out of Africa to all parts of the world, where we settled for hundreds of thousands, and in some places for tens of thousands of years. And we have a formidable, incredible history on every part of the continent. Check out my previous series where I was actually continent hopping and highlighting evidence of our great history abroad. Sister Barbara, okay, comment there for Barbara. Let's see what Barbara was saying here. There are individuals here in Barbados who have skin tones which are darker than white Europeans. They are referred to as white Bajan. Also, Eki Beckis, they keep themselves to themselves. Yes, they actually mention. He actually mentions some of these in the book. A very small community of Eki Beckis that keep themselves to themselves and have been very incestuous, it's said. But just a fragment, but not representative of the tens of thousands that were supposedly transplanted to Barbados. But there is evidence of tens of thousands of Africans descendants still in Barbados. So many more comments. I want to thank you all so much for keeping it locked. Thank you in advance for sharing. Thank you for doing even more research and for sharing any information that you decide to bring to this platform. It's a pleasure doing the works, you know, for you, our wonderful audience. All being well, I'll see some of you on Saturday at the Reparations March, because we demand our reparations. They got their payment. They were being paid for 200 years. It took 200 years to repay the debt, you know, to the enslavers. Well, they can take 200 years to repay us the debt that we are due. And we are going to be campaigning for our reparations. We may not get it in our lifetime, but maybe our children or our children's children will get the reparations that we are due. Rise up, family. Keep it locked. All being well, I'll be back here next strong, same time, with another episode of our investigation into the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. Sister Shanice, out of here for now. Bye for now.